We're in. Good afternoon. Welcome to From Signal to Execution with Transfix and SONAR. I will be your host today, Brad Guinane, CRO of SONAR, and I'm joined today with Carly Gunby, the VP of Revenue at Transfix. And we're looking forward to sharing a little bit more about SONAR, a little bit more about Transfix, and talking about how we can give logistics providers and brokers the edge in a rapidly evolving and changing market that we're in. But before we do, Carly, maybe give us a quick overview and intro of your background, how you got to where you're at today before we dive in.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hey, everyone. My name is Carly Gunby. I am VP of Revenue over at Transfix. I've been at Transfix for 7 years, holding various roles. Prior to being a solutions and technology provider for the freight industry, we were a truck brokerage. We were a broker for over 10 years, and we lived through many different cycles in the market, many different learnings. But through that time, we doubled down on technology, and we doubled down on the data that we had as a broker. About a year and a half ago, we had made the decision to divest our operations and take the next step on building out our technology and bringing it to the market so that what we had learned and experienced could help other brokers. And so that's where we are today. Today, Transfix has a number of solutions, but things to highlight through our partnership with SONAR is how we use the data that they provide to help us work with brokers to understand where their cost lies within the market, and they can understand their behaviors so they know how to best leverage data from both SONAR and Transfix. And then how the data that SONAR provides and supports the TMS that we have in operating as the backbone of brokers' operations.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's probably one of my favorite things, Carly, about your team and working with you guys and Jonathan is not only are you from, the industry and having worked at a third-party logistics, but you literally built your products while running that business, which I think is amazing. And I think your customers, both of our customers are benefiting from that experience that you guys have to really build, purpose-built tools that, you were using, right? So they're built in the way that you believe they can be successful. And I think that really kind of highlights the very beginning too of our partnership. I know we've been partnered a long time, even prior to when you guys kind of entered the space of, just purely providing the tools that you now do in the software applications and cost models and things. But, maybe as we get going, what are, some of those learnings that you can share that have really driven your guys' ability to create these products in a way that, users, want and need to have them?
Yeah, and I think it's the fact that it was battle tested on our own P&L, right? We didn't just build freight and then, hoped and prayed that it worked out for our brokers and then found out whether it was like working to their advantage or not. Every piece of our TMS and our cost models came from a pain point within our brokerage. And so early on in our days, we partnered with SONAR. They were helping us by providing a market rate, which was really impactful in helping us understand what the market was doing and also where we thought the market was going. But what was more important to us was how do we buy against the market, right? And so the market is what it is. But for us, it was where do we fit within that space and how do we price accordingly, not only to execute the freight, but to service our customers. And then profitability is key to that. And so what we found is we needed to better understand that. We had data scientists and analysts kind of come to us with like a V1 of a custom cost model, a V2 of a custom cost model. And it wasn't until we had our data scientists and our analysts actually on the floor. And we would run through this a couple times a year at Transfix, where we would have every single person who worked at Transfix, no matter what their title was, cover freight, operate freight, work within the customer ecosystem so that they could understand what are the behaviors that drive your cost so that you knew when you had an advantage in the market, or if you were slow to respond to the market, you had a heads up to that and could, incentivize the behaviors that you wanted out of your team to make those changes. And so I think that that's what's kind of a huge differentiator for us, right? Like we're looking at every part of our technology from a pain point that came from being a broker, whether that was from a specific shipper, right? If there was a massive shipper that tendered me 200 loads a day and I had to figure out, did I want to accept every one of them? Were they all profitable? What does that look like? Well, we created a decision tree for logic for this. And then in that decision tree, I couldn't figure out if everything was profitable or not, one load at a time. I had a cost model to help me do that. So, by working day in and day out with operators and shippers and all those in this ecosystem of freight, it helped us build a product that's actually effective, can be used by operators.
Yeah, and as you guys have taken that to market over the past couple of years, what are some of the most common pain points really for the customers, and maybe using specific examples? Like, what are you guys hearing when you go in? Maybe you expect to hear some things, but how does that show up for your customers where they're saying, hey, we're really struggling here, or we're really struggling with this? What are some of those common things that you guys are consistently hearing on brokerage floors as you've gone out to the broader market?
Yeah, so there's two ways in which we're hearing things. On like the operational side, we're hearing we have a TMS, but it only takes us so far. And so now I have all of these vendor relationships and I don't want to manage them. Like, they're all good within their own little compartment, but it's a lot more work within managing that. And then that inches up their cost per load, right? And so from that side, that is what we're hearing on the TMS side, which is why we're like, we should bring our TMS to market. We had built automated scheduling and decision trees and workflow prioritizations and had a carrier app and had all of this done. NFI was our first customer to license it almost 2 years ago. And so when they said, hey, we're going to double down on the product and we want to, roll this out to our entire organization, we knew we had a market fit, especially after talking to other brokers. So we hear that problem a lot on the operations side. On the cost model side, it's, we have this data, we understand what's happening in the market, but I can't figure out why we can't be more competitive or what's happening. And so one of the ways that we work to partner with our brokers is we say, all right, let's look at like, where do you guys stand with the data that you have from SONAR? What are you guys looking at? What portion of their business are you guys working with them in terms of the APIs and the tender rejection reports? And like, what are you hearing from there? And then let's look at that, merge it with your own historical data and tell you what are the buying behaviors that you're not optimizing in this region or in this market as to why you can't kind of improve your cost or maybe inch down that cost to look at your margin as a whole. And so it's part of the partnership that we give with brokers is we want them to understand what their data can do for them. So we unpack it a little bit and we say, down to a user level, this is where you're kind of, losing your edge, or down to a market level, you're waiting 3 days to create a tender and then you're posting it same day. That's inching up your cost, right? If you would have covered this 48 hours in advance, that's where you see that your team negotiates most aggressively. So we're really trying to get into a lot of those problems that we had and how we solved them. But it's also really exciting since we've been out of the brokerage game for a year and a half, and we're in a really exciting time in the market to have these conversations with our brokers where they say, all right, I need to talk to my shippers, or I need to understand how to manage this. Like, how do we do this with the data that we have through the SONAR and Transfix partnership?
Yeah, no doubt. And it's interesting, maybe to add, I'm curious your thoughts. We're, from my perspective, from doing this now for, 15 years, when you think about operations experience and being at SONAR, it's interesting how important the rate, everybody keys in on the rate and what is the benchmark, and SONAR's wrong. No, wait, DAT's right. No, SONAR's right. No, DAT's wrong, right? There's like this constant back and forth battle of like, this benchmark has to be right, or hey, my data is right because I've actually executed and the benchmark is wrong theoretically. Like, there's all these kind of up and down viewpoints as I've had conversations with customers and prospects over the years, and I'm sure you can relate. But I think our perspective and where we align very well with you guys is it's really what you can do with the data, right? And it's really how it helps drive action. Like you mentioned a great example with the tender lead time piece, excuse me, and a data set, a core data set and data series for us that our customers rely really heavily on, is that tender data that's highlighting, what's happening with demand, how is supply reacting from an accept to reject, and then what are the lead times in that market to help you make a pricing decision alongside of your pricing data with market data, right? It's all these components that come together to help you make the best possible decision. And I think that's really something that I've noticed, and I'm sure you have too, but curious your thoughts, that has really accelerated in the last 1 to 2 years of customers, looking beyond just that's the absolute truth. And no, I need to take into account multiple data points, multiple data sets, especially my own, and make the best decision for my business to win, to avoid freight that's not profitable, to win profitable freight, and continue to move my business forward.
Yeah, I mean, there's a world of data out there, and everybody has opinions for kind of where it sits within there. I think that one of the ways that both Transfix and SONAR excel in this is kind of in that customer success side of things, where we give our brokers the support to review the data that they have at their fingertips. Not everybody has access to the same data sets either. Everybody's kind of using different pieces of data, and everybody has an opinion as to like how to interpret that. Like, he who controls the data controls the narrative, right? And so for us, we have found that giving our brokers a data analyst on every account to help them kind of piece through what's important and what has the most impact to their business has been key to helping them understand and interpret that so that they know how to leverage it. The data that we're giving them is a lot more heavier based on their behavior and how they react to the data that SONAR supplies, right? Like when they're looking at the rejection rates and the lead time and all that, how are they reacting to that, and what behaviors come as a result of that, and then what is the impact of those behaviors on their bottom line and their margin and their buying power. And so that's how we look at it. And that's why I think partnerships like this work really well, is because each of us kind of have our own competitive edge and a subset of where we provide value to. So if you're already partnered with one of us, to have the option to have access to that data on the other side to make a more full picture decision as to whether you price one way, you have a conversation with a shipper, you double down on something with your operations team. I mean, all of this data can impact so many pieces of your business and the decisions that you make, that it's really critical to have the support to look at it in a holistic way, but also how does that apply to the business itself that you're operating?
No, I think the word holistic is a great way to describe how I think we both view our partnership and how we view the market and transactions. And I think from our perspective, that's where we truly believe majority of the value in our offering resides, is in pre-price discovery data that's updated on a daily basis from routing guides, what's happening, accepted, rejected, how is that driving kind of your foundation when you go into an RFP, and to your point, providing that analyst support of our subject matter experts as well, to kind of give you that baseline knowledge. And then to your point, I think one of the really successful aspects of our partnership is saying, okay, you have that foundational understanding and strategic insight as a pricing team, as an operations manager, as a sales leader going to a customer, but how do we really operationalize it for you now? And that's kind of where we not wash our hands, but we're like, here's your data. And I think you guys do an amazing job of bringing that all together with your experience operating in the market, and then bringing this data together for individual users. So I think it's really a symbiotic way in which we interact. Our two offerings, I guess, interact and provide value for for customers. And it's great. It's been a great partnership up until this point, I think, because of that.
Yeah, I think that, what we found is, especially for brokerages, we always joke that say that, like, we used to say it about shippers, but we also say it about brokerages, is that every broker is its own unique snowflake, right? The data that they have, the data that they leverage, how they apply it to their business, is really kind of what gives them their own competitive edge in a sense. And so I think that applies here too, right? Question for you is, when you're partnering with brokerages that are looking at the shift in the market, which data sets that you guys provide are you normally pointing them to help them manage operations and kind of the more holistic approach as they're looking at their business?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and it's really a core, couple data points, I guess you'd say, and our team's done a great job of operationalizing those in a bunch of different ways. But just to start, maybe at the very top, I think what is most interesting in this market, especially about what we can provide, is part of SONAR is almost like this, just amalgamation of all this transportation data, right? Like, some of it is publicly available, bringing in fuel dashboards, fuel data from the truck stop, from the wholesale rack, bringing in ocean bookings, customs data insights, intermodal rail, all of these modes to give someone kind of this complete picture who's operating in this market of what are all of the potential levers that could drive or could impact, right, the freight markets really across the board. So if we start kind of all the way upstream, that's, I think, where we really start in providing a ton of initial value is at least making that all available. So, if that's of interest to you and you're curious about all of these data sets and endpoints that do impact, ultimately when you get to a load and you're trying to price it with a customer, it's there for you. So we start there, but then as far as getting into, some of more of the transactional insights and the data that I think most logistics companies know us for and really appreciate having access to it, it really centers around, our ability to see, what's happening in the routing guide. You view the transportation market, the for-hire transportation market, as, this 800 billion plus annual spend beast, and only about half of that is for hire truckload moves, right? Like, half of it's private fleet. So only about half of that is for hire truckload moves that in about 20-ish, 25% of that is spot rate data. And, for years and years and years, really the only publicly available data that was available was spot rate data. So kind of that long tail of the for hire market in terms of insights. And what SONAR's done a really good job of doing is kind of capturing that other piece of the for hire market, which is, really what's happening. And if you talk to any shipper, they'll say, yeah, I'm 80-90+% contracted, right? Like, that's a pretty common scenario usually. And where that data is transacted, we're seeing those anonymized transactions, and we're able to say, what's happening with that demand at a market level? Is it increasing or decreasing? How is capacity responding to it? Are they accepting or rejecting? And how far out in advance are tenders being transacted before, anything's priced in the spot market? So I'd say that really is the core and the crux of how our logistics customers look to us to give them insight in the truckload market specifically. For this conversation, and then those data sets, our product team's done a great job of combining those into a little bit more actionable insights. So using things like natural language processing to combine all those insights and say, this market is becoming harder, or it's becoming easier, or this lane is becoming tighter, and providing scoring alongside of that. So really, we've built a lot off of those underlying core data sets to give our customers as much advanced insight as we can on a daily basis of, how's capacity changing ultimately. Like, I think that's like the core. Curious your thoughts too, but that's usually the core question we get. Pricing is one, but then also what's happening with capacity, and how do we really understand how that's going to affect and impact whether I'm making a decision today for a load, or if I'm looking at a 30, 40, 50, 100 plus mini bid that moves in a month or 2 months or something like that, like project freight. So that is definitely kind of where we set ourselves apart in being able to provide those insights. But yeah, sorry, I had a question in there somewhere, so curious your thoughts there too.
Yeah. So when we look at it in terms of like, where does capacity sit? How do I buy in this? Like, we're essentially telling them within our platform, you have the ability on both spot and contract, right? So if you're looking at a spot load and you're saying, what if I price it to pick today? You can, submit the parameters for what that is, press submit, and you're going to see how do you buy same day, right? Because again, we're analyzing more of the behaviors. We're letting our partner here do a lot of the heavy lifting with the market, and we're using you guys as the SME. But what we're doing is we're saying, how do you buy same day in a market when capacity is tightening? How do you buy when you have 3 days lead time? How do you buy with this customer when you have 3 days lead time, right? And so in the platform, you're able to kind of double down on each of those to understand what that looks like. If markets are changing, and so some shippers are doing 100-lane mini bids, right? Like, it's circumstantial to each shipper, but they could do it, whether it's a 1 month period or a 3 month period, or a lot of routing guides are changing right now, right? Because some companies are saying, we're not moving the freight for that cost anymore, and a shipper is going to move through it. Our platform allows you to look at a long-term rate, 1 lane at a time, so if you're an account manager and you have the opportunity to kind of price something and you don't want to bottleneck your pricing team by sending them another RFP during the season, account managers will be given all of that data, right? They can put the customer name in, they can put the length, they can put the lane, and then the volume input's dynamic. So they should be asking, well, how many have you shipped on this lane so far? How many do you expect to remain? What's seasonality? What's been the demand for this, right? They're getting all this good information so that you can price accordingly. If you have that information, it's an input into your cost, right? It affects your bottom line and your margin. So you're able to put all of that in, and then it's going to give you this beautiful graph that's going to show you, here's how you're expected to buy during this time. Here's where your cost lies. If you want to go aggressive, which you may need to win the freight, this is the risk that you're exposed to, right? This is so that you have an understanding of what that looks like. You're able to do that on 1 lane if you need something quick as an account manager. We're able to upload an entire RFP. We'll quote all of it based on your cost and any rules that you've created. And it'll be done in less than 3 seconds per lane. And it's also giving you the insights that we have through our partnership, where we can show you, hey, there's a lot of volatility in this lane. There's a high swing from where the low end of the market is to the high end of the market. And or even if you quote it right in the middle, you should be aware that the risk is higher. So we're doing kind of a lot of the not the same work, but we're giving a lot more information to help make an informed decision unique to each broker. Because again, not everyone buys the same. Not everyone looks at the market the same. Not everyone sees the same amount of negative margin as a risk versus what the potential upside could be in the long term. And so we're just trying to help you understand, with all of these shifts, where do we expect you to land within them?
No, definitely. And you kind of covered a little bit of this in my next question, but can we spend a couple of minutes on build versus buy? And just, of what, just curious I think it's something that we both see a lot. I think we both see a lot in this market. I mean, candidly, you guys certainly built your own thing, but just kind of curious, your take now, having been on both sides, what are your thoughts on the build versus buy for logistics customers?
Obviously, if you asked me this question 3 years ago when I was a broker,
that's why you have great perspective. That's why I'm asking you now.
Here's what I think. I think that you can build a really phenomenal product in-house if you have the right people who are in operations, who understand the strategic goals and can help you get to where you need to be. That can also be extremely expensive, especially for a brokerage where markets are cyclical. And when you're looking at the long-term net of build versus buy, I would say, very transparently, we had a lot of our P&L in R&D, right?
Mhm.
We ran a successful brokerage, but when it came to looking at overall profitability and like where we could do that, so much of our investment was in R&D and, continuing to build this really phenomenal product to operate our business. When we looked at it though, at our long-term strategy for what we could, when we looked at the product that we had and what we could do with it and the impact we could have when we brought it to market, and when you looked at like a long-term P&L, it was a no-brainer for us, right? Like we should double down on this technology, because not only could we use it to inch down our cost per load through, automation and managing workflows and giving our account managers more time to double down in their relationships, but we knew that that could benefit others. And so there are outliers, I think, in this industry where people have created a really phenomenal project and they're going to continuously have the budget to manage it and build it and really build it around the business that they have. I think that's more the exception than the rule, right? When you're looking at what they're going to build versus buy, I think NFI and our partnership there is a fantastic case study to highlight, right? They moved away from a proprietary TMS that they had spent years investing in, and realized there was a gap for where they wanted to be and where the system that they had within Transfix was. And so it's a heavy evaluation. We built the backbone of your operations and a TMS that can kind of get you where you need to be. I think too many companies are very dedicated to their legacy products, and in turn, it's hurting their performance and their own legacy that they're building out as a company. And so, when looking at build versus buy, it's a massive decision. But I think anytime you look at the financials of it, buying in this market, and having one neck to choke and managing that partnership gives you a lot more leverage than kind of building and piecemealing together throughout the process with other vendors.
Yeah, and I think it's also just an interesting time too with the proliferation of AI and people and teams using that. I think it's always been a question out there, right? Like especially if we're thinking whether it's cost model or TMS or some of those things. But I think it's interesting now, and there's a lot of noise, and I think this is just my opinion. No one's asking except for you and I. Maybe we care, but I do think it'll be interesting. We'll see some of this shake out, and I think experts are experts for a reason, and I think that it'll be interesting to watch shake out. I think is my general perspective on that. But to kind of keep us moving, because I know we have limited time here. One more question I have for you, as we sit here and just talk about maybe shifting back a little bit more towards the cost model side of things with Transfix specifically, being partnered with SONAR on a number of different data points as part of that cost model, but also with a DAT. Why is Transfix best positioned to win in this battle of providing best in class cost model? Because I think, again, going back to the AI commentary, there's a lot of noise out there. There's companies popping up every single day, and just kind of curious, based on what you guys are seeing and hearing, why you guys are so well positioned to win in this market with your cost model and the partners you have.
Yeah, I think that we were very strategic when we came to the market as to who we were going to partner with. In this example, specifically in this conversation, SONAR was a really great partner for us as a brokerage. It was a no-brainer for us when we were moving from this. And we had always needed to understand what was happening in the market versus what we were actually seeing and how we could act on it. That was always the gap. And that's kind of what we're looking to build through our partnership, is that there's this entire better together message that can be formed here, right? Like you have this massive source of information through SONAR and the data, but how do you act upon it? And that's what Transfix is here to support you with, right? We're helping you understand how do you, in your own situation with your own goals, like we get really deep with our partners to say, what do you want to do? What are you trying to accomplish? And then we say, okay, here's the path forward with that and how we can do it. the brokers who are going to win in this market are the ones that are going to move from like knowing how to do it, but knowing how to do it quickly and to be more precise. And so that's where we come in. Like, we want to help you guys better manage your business, and giving you the data to do that. And we want to help you by giving you data scientists and customer success, and then, a partnership that, our teams have an amazing push-pull, right? Like, they're constantly talking to each other. We can do calls. There's ways that we've added value to our existing partnerships and brokers that use us together, that have seen impacts from what that looks like and how to scale from there. So I think it's a no-brainer for any brokers that have the opportunity to partner with either of us, to, especially in this market and jumping forward, and managing and capitalizing on the shift that we're all seeing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I would definitely second that. I think we've had very few over the years who don't agree with certain aspects or parts of SONAR data. I think it's, for a long period of time until the recent history, really been an enterprise 3PL product or logistics product, and still certainly is that. But the way that you guys are able to support us and operationalize the data and customize it for individual logistics providers, kind of up and down, that whole company size profile has been dramatically helpful for us in getting the data where it needs to be. So it's certainly been a great last year and a half for us in having these data points available and accessible through the custom cost models that you guys have built. And I think certainly the sky is the limit, and excited to see where we continue to go. Continue to go with this one. So appreciate your time, Carly. Again, appreciate the partnership. I think we're going to open up for some Q&A here. In the side, there should be a little chat for everyone. If you haven't been dropping some requests or questions along the way, we will get to those here shortly. And if you want to get a hold of Carly and team, you can do so by, Carly.
You can go to transfix.io. You can email me. It's carlygunby@transfix.io or sales@transfix.io, or find me on LinkedIn.
There we go. I like it. And similarly, you can find us at gosonar.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, of course, as well, and email us at bd@gosonar.com. Thank you so much for the time. And Carly, thank you for joining us as well. And again, appreciate the partnership and look forward to continuing the work that we're doing.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. This was fun.